Hello everyone and welcome back to my Python course, and in this video I'm going to be explaining a concept in Python known as functions. Now functions allow us to pack a code into something called a function, and then once you run the function the function will execute the line of codes inside of it. Now there's several reasons why we want to be able to use functions, and that can be to make a code cleaner and more readable, as well as actually making our code work more efficiently, because if we're just running the same code over and over again and copying and pasting everything like that, it can end up being quite messy and can slow down the overall performance of the program. Now, I'm going to start off by showing you guys what a function is and how we can actually define one. Now, in Python, to define a function, we want to use the def keyword, so def. And the def means that we're going to define something called a function. Now, as you can see here, VS Code has highlighted the keyword def here in the red color, and the reason is because it's waiting for us to write something else here, and that is going to be the function name. Now let's call this function called main, and now as you can see, VS Code once again is saying, well, something is missing here. We're still missing something else to define the function, and we're actually missing two things. So first off, we have to put open and closing parentheses, because this is going to contain something called the argument list, which I'm going to talk about later. So in the parameter list. I'm going to talk about the parameter list later in this tutorial. But before we get into that, we have to write one more thing, which is going to be the colon, and now we can press a new line. So now we defined a function called main, and if we now just write down this keyword called pass, which will basically mean don't do anything right now, because if we actually I'll leave this empty, then if we want to run the function, we type down main and then put open and close parentheses, and this is the argument list. So this is the parameter list, this is the argument list. I get into what that means in a minute. So if we run this, it will say that indentation error, expected an indented block after function in line 1. Now the problem is that we have to tell Python that this is the end of the function. Right now it's thinking that we're calling main inside of itself, which is something called recursion, but I won't get into that right now. But what we need to do is that we need to use the pass keyword I was talking about before, so we can get rid of this error. Pass means this is the end of the function, or basically don't do anything in this function, just exit it, nothing's going to happen in it. So we're going to do this, and we're going to run it, and nothing happens. So we don't get any errors, but the function's not doing anything, which is not that useful. So let's write some code in there. We do print out hello world, if I can type it down. Okay, let's run this again. And function will print out hello world. Now you may start looking at things as kind of useless. If I want to print out hello world 5 times, I can just do this, right? That's 5. And that'll print out hello world. Well, instead of just calling this function 5 times, I can just do something else let's copy this and then we'll just replace all of these with that. That didn't work. Okay. Why is my emulation not working? Okay, there you go. That's 5 versions of the print statement, and here we go. It prints out hello world 5 times. Now, if you go have some really simple code like that, it makes more sense to just write it as out, because the ease and stuff like packaging it into the function and having to call the function several times, this could be more lines of code which the interpreter has to handle. But instead of doing that, we can functions are more useful when you have larger pieces of when you have a larger project and we're trying to combine larger pieces of logic together to be able to form a useful program. Now, it's a good practice whenever having a function to give it a very specific name, because a function should only do one thing and it should only be very good at doing the thing it was defined to do. So first thing we have to do is change the name to say this is going to print out hello world. So we do print hello world. So now we know that this function is going to print out hello world. This is just a convention. And then we can do this thing's going to print out hello world, which makes things a lot easier. But now we have to change the value of the function we're calling, because we can't just call a function called hello, because that does not, main, because the function main does not exist anymore inside of this program. So let's run this again, and as you can see, it will still work. One thing we've done is just change the function's name. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is this thing here called the argument list. Now arguments, actually, before I get into arguments, I'll talk about something else, which is about scope, because that will help us understand what all of this scope and this parameter list and stuff like that is. So x is equal to 200. This is a variable. If I print it out, we'll print out the value of x. What I should get is going to be x is equal to 200. Fine. Now, what we can do here is that in this thing let's call this function readx. We will run the code now. And as you can see, we can print out the value of the variable outside of the scope of the function, which is in the global scope in this example. And we can just read the value. Now, what do we mean by scope? Well, you see, everything outside of this function, the function, well, it can read the variable, but it cannot write the variable. It means that we can print out the value of the variable, see the status of the variable, what is that the data is holding, but we can't actually print out, we can't actually change the value of the variable, because the function can only change the value of variables inside of its scope. This is the global scope. Everything inside of here is the scope of the function. Now, the way, if you try to use something like x is equal to 300, and then we'll print out x before. If you try to run this, now what do you think we're going to get? Well, we're going to get an unbound local error. Local variable x is referenced before assignment. Now, you're saying, oh, I don't want you to look for the variable. It's like, sorry, I meant like, the variable x you probably think is existing inside the variable, this function. But the function doesn't actually know that the variable x exists when it tries to change the value to it, change the value of the variable or write to the variable. So the value right here is x. We can read it from the function, but we can't change it. The way we can change the value of the function is by using the global, to change the value of the variable is to use a global keyword. So if you do global x, it means that now what we have essentially done is that Python now knows that the function now knows that the value x is inside of your scope. So now we can change, alter, read, do whatever we want with the variable. We're free to do whatever we want. So we can run this file, and now you can see it changed the value to 300. And if you still don't believe me, we can say that we can print out here. So new value of variable. I can type this x is x, and then you'll do. Here we go. That's just an F string. I'll talk about this in another tutorial. But let's just run this, and as you can see, it clearly works. And if still don't, just put it here. As you can see, you get 200, 200, 300, and then 300. So clearly, it has altered the global state of the variable. The next thing we can do, instead of calling this function like that, we can also package this into a variable. So we can do something like read x is equal to let's call it y. So if you run this thing called y, it's going to just run the function. I always do that. If I just take this out and I run this again, this will print out whenever you assign this value of the variable, it's just going to run the variable. When we assign the value of a function to a variable, it's going to run the function. Okay, sorry, I don't think I saved the file properly. Okay, let's try this again. Yeah, so it was working. So whenever we assign a function to a variable, whenever we during the declaration of it, the function is going to be run by the interpreter. So another thing we can do in Python is something called return. So in functions, you have something called control flow, and in while loops and for loops. I'll get into that in another tutorial, but I had a tutorial on that before if you wanted to watch that. I'll put a link to it in the description below. But now we can talk about something called the parameter list. Now, you see these brackets here, you're probably wondering what's the point of these. Well, I can actually pass things in, so we can pass things in here. So we can arg1, arg2, arg3. I would do print out. Actually, you can see my IDE Visual Studio Code can identify is highlighting these a different color because it knows we did not use these yet. So we do print out arg1, arg2, arg3, and then we'll do something like read x 10, 20, 30. Now let's print out all of these variables, and as we can see, we get we're printing on console 10, 20, 30. This is something which we use a lot in programs, and actually before I go into what that means, I can just I'll say here that this here is called the parameter list. These are all the parameters. We're using parameters here. They're not value until we call the function, and then these here is this is the argument list, and all these little individual things here, these are the arguments which we pass into the function. So this is the parameters and the parameter list. This is the arguments and the argument list. That's a brief overview of what they are. So the last thing I want to cover is something called the return, and return is a keyword which allows us to exit a function, and also if we want to, we can give the value a function. So we can give the function a value which is going to be equal to a value to return. So we call this function home, for example, and then we're going to return hello world. And if you call this function, we're saying, what does a return mean? What does hello world mean? Well, it basically means that actually I don't hello world here just to show you something. It's kind of cool. Actually, I'm editor kind of had a little sneak peek here, so you can see this has got a lower opacity than this line, and you'll see why. So if you run this file, nothing happens. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, the reason actually I'll print out this is before hello world. Let's run this. So as you can see, this is before hello world, and then it never ran this file. This is because as soon as you typed on the return keyword, it doesn't matter if you have anything or not. I'll just delete this. This is just for example. So we'll run this. We get this. As soon as it reaches the return statement, it will exit the function. It will just stop everything it's doing. It's going to like close the function altogether. It won't do anything after that. Whatever code comes after this is redundant. It's just useless, unactivated code. There's actually no need for it. Unless we have something like if we check, so like if x is equal to 0, then return, or like else print out this thing here. Like we can use control flow, we can use if statements, like if we want to exit a function in a certain case, we can do stuff like that. So that is what we can do return, and I'll show you one more thing. So if we do return hello world, this can be double brackets, I mean double quotation marks if you want to do that. We run this, we don't get anything here. The reason is because this function here, we have to print it out, because now this function holds the value hello world as it just exited that. So if you do print hello world, as you can see, it works and it will print out hello world. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It was quite quick and I tried to make it as informative as possible. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did appreciate the video, can you please leave a like, and I'll appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. So thank you for watching. Bye.